The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Published for the first time in a shortened version for an American magazine in 1890 and the following year as a standalone book, The Picture of Dorian Gray is considered the manifesto of the poetics of Oscar Wilde, and one of the most successful expressions of the English decadentism and aestheticism. Dorian Gray, a young man of extraordinary beauty, had his portrait painted by a painter. Haunted by the fear of the old age, he obtains with a spell that the traces of the years will not appear on his face, but just in the picture. The protagonist abandons himself to the wildest excesses, maintaining intact his beauty while his painted image gets older. One day, in front of the picture that highlights the deception of his own life, Dorian Gray, overwhelmed by anxiety, rips up the canvas and then falls to the ground dead. The servants will find the corpse of a wizened old man at the foot of a painting depicting Dorian Gray when he was young, beautiful and pure. Written with a clear and refined style, full of brilliant aphorisms, witty dialogues, description of environments, the picture of Dorian Gray caused a wide resonance among readers. The novel represents a bold response to the Victorian era, and it focuses on some of the typical subjects both of decadentism, such as the myth of eternal youth and the theme of depravity, and of aestheticism, of which Wilde is a representative. The novel celebrates the research, even exasperated, of beauty and pleasure, the top of the spiritual life for the aesthetic movement. With this work, Wilde takes position against the timorous bourgeois morality, reaffirming that life itself, as an individual artistic creation and as a supreme art form, cannot be subject to moral judgment. The Picture of Dorian Gray.
The studio was filled with the rich odour of roses, and when the light summer wind stirred amidst the trees of the garden, there came through the open door the heavy scent of the lilac, or the more delicate perfume of the pink-flowering thorn. From the corner of the divan of Persian saddlebags on which he was lying, smoking, as was his custom, innumerable cigarettes, Lord Henry Wotton could just catch the gleam of the honey-sweet and honey-coloured blossoms of a laburnum, whose tremulous branches seemed hardly able to bear the burden of a beauty so flame-like as theirs, and now and then the fantastic shadows of birds in flight flitted across the long tussore silk curtains that were stretched in front of the huge window, producing a kind of momentary Japanese effect, and making him think of those pallid, jade-faced painters of Tokyo, who through the medium of an art that is necessarily immobile, seek to convey the sense of swiftness and motion. The sullen murmur of the bees, shouldering their way through the long unmown grass, or circling with monotonous insistence round the dusty gilt horns of the straggling woodbine, seemed to make the stillness more oppressive. The dim roar of London was like the bourdon note of a distant organ. In the centre of the room, clamped to an upright easel, stood the full-length portrait of a young man of extraordinary personal beauty, and in front of it, some little distance away, was sitting the artist himself, Basil Hallward, whose sudden disappearance some years ago caused at the time such public excitement, and gave rise to so many strange conjectures. As the painter looked at the gracious and comely form he had so skilfully mirrored in his art, a smile of pleasure passed across his face, and seemed about to linger there. But he suddenly started up, and closing his eyes, placed his fingers upon the lids, as though he sought to imprison within his brain some curious dream from which he feared he might awake.